Wow. I'm not supposed to follow animal acts or children or videos produced by Lisa. Wow. I'm Donald Broughton, and I'm honored to be up here, and can't tell you how excited I am about what is being created by Craig and his team, and I'm just glad to be a part of it, quite frankly. Got a lot of, hold on a second. Could everybody just silence their phones? I gotta take this. Hello? No? Yeah, what, really? Never? Ever? In the history? Okay, yeah, I'll tell him. I'll see what he says. That's the Sharks. And they all want to make you an offer. But seriously, ideas change the world, and there are all kinds of ideas that we're presented with. You know, if you look back in history, this is Luca Pacioli, okay? Luca Pacioli, I can't say for Italian, whatever. And Luca did something really fairly interesting. He documented what the bankers in Florence had figured out how to do. The bankers in Florence, Italy, in the early part of the 1400s, figured out how to do double entry accounting. Very simple, very basic. But as a result, they understood better what the value of a transaction was, what the value of business was. And so as a result, it became the epicenter, the financial hub of Western civilization as we came out of the Dark Ages into the Renaissance and really went into world global exploration. So if AOC has somebody to be mad at, this is probably who she should be upset with, because he wrote it down and he put it into text, and it became literally the accounting textbook for the next couple of hundred years. And the bankers in Florence, Italy literally dominated the world of global finance for the next 300 years as a result of his ideas that he documented. And then if you think about it, there are all kinds of ideas. There's the Da Vinci, the Epiphany moment, the Galileo original idea. I don't know about you all, but I've never had one of those. There's the go out and recognize a lot of really other good ideas and bring them all together. Now, if you represent the original idea, someone else's idea, as your own, that's called plagiarism. If you do what John Larkin and I do, which is bring them all together and put them out collectively, it's called research. Then, of course, Einstein said that we call it research because we don't know what we're doing. If we didn't know what we were doing, we wouldn't call it research, I believe is the actual quote. But the bottom line is ideas can really actually change the world. And so if you look at some of the ideas that have changed the marketplaces more closer to home. If this will forward, hello. It's not working. Emmanuel, forward once for me, please. Well, it's that damn Google thing. But ideas change the course of history is the bottom line here. So this is Richard. Richard decided in 1886 to start selling watches via a mail order catalog. And he did so well that he hired his buddy Alva, who was really good at, about a year later, who was really good at repairing those watches. And over time, they continued to build their company and sell more and more things until by 1908, in this catalog that they sent out, you could literally buy everything, the house up to including an entire house, and everything you can imagine to be put in it. And of course, the names are Richard Sears and Alva Roebuck. And I'll point out something that it says here in this ad from that time frame. We sell everything by mail order only. That's who the company was until 1925 when they opened their first retail store. By 1931, 5 years later, retail sales in the box stores had exceeded the mail order. And of course, by the end of World War II, they were the largest retailer in the United States, which they continued to be well into the 80s when they were finally overtaken by Walmart. But the bottom line is that they started with an idea. It wasn't necessarily that original, but they built upon it and they pivoted. Because that's the other thing that great entrepreneurs do is they take really great ideas, they recognize them. You don't have to be Da Vinci. You don't have to be Galileo, but if you recognize good ideas and you're willing to pivot along the way, as they did, then you can have great financial success. Other things have happened. There's a guy, borrowed $100, a guy named James, and he and his buddy decided to hire a bunch of teenagers and deliver messages around Seattle, Washington. And then they started a few packages. And they had bicycles for the longer trips. And somewhere around 1913, they bought their first Model T. And the advent of the telephone said, not many messages to deliver, but there are more and more packages. And so as they bought those Model Ts, and they expanded on the West Coast, and then the East Coast, and then across the United States, they were there. They were there to help deliver packages for Sears, Roebuck, J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward, and everybody else. There's a fellow Tennessean, Fred Smith, 1973, bought a few airplanes. You know, on his first night of business, we'll see what happens tomorrow, but on his first night of business, 386 folks, team members, 14 planes, managed to pick up and deliver 186 packages. A little more volume gets moved via FedEx today than it did back then. But the bottom line is, what really happened with Fred Smith and really happened with FedEx is he changed the way we think about things. Because fundamentally, we now think nothing of being able to have anything from anywhere in the world delivered to anywhere else in the world within 24 hours. It changed our perception of immediacy. It changed our perception of what was realistic, rational to expect. And as a result, made other things possible. So this kid may have sat in his dorm room when he was 18, 19 years old and wrote a little program that he called a browser, Mosaic, that allowed us all to enjoy Al Gore's invention, the World Wide Web. But the truth of the matter is that the reality of what he created, one of the best and biggest ways it's monetized is through what Fred Smith and James Casey facilitated, whether it be Sears and Roebuck's catalog, or, oh yeah, then there's another guy who started with a little idea in a garage selling books. And it's interesting, the name of this company was originally Cadabra, I guess like abracadabra. And he changed it to Amazon because he wanted it to represent the longest river, the biggest conduit of retail at some point, right? Okay, fine, biggest river, biggest conduit. Oh yeah, and the other reason was because Amazon starts with an A, and in the early web searches, it meant it would pop to the top just because it was alphabetically that way. But that said, what you're doing isn't necessarily an original idea. I made this presentation to DAT back in 2011. We all sat around and looked at it, and we said, this is ridiculous. Somebody ought to do this. But every time we got to the physical fulfillment side of it, we all went, ugh. And we all got frustrated, and we all quit because we couldn't find it. I can regale you with stories. I sat in Brad Jacobs' personal house at his dining room table with Scott Mallet, his chief strategy officer, and one of my smartest colleagues of all time, and we had debated with each other for 2 or 3 hours how to do this and couldn't figure it out. Got frustrated and quit. And so a couple years ago, when you said to me, well, it's a financial settlement, I went, duh. It's that simple. It was a pivot. It was wonderful. So, is it needed? Yeah. Hell yeah. Heck yeah. It's this simple. This is you know, just in the last 3 years alone, we've seen a situation in which the freight rates, if you go look at the spot rate, 3 years ago to March, the spot rate for truckload, dry van, over the road was 16% lower than it was the previous year. Within relatively short order, it was 36% higher than it was a year ago. And it's fallen back down, and it's back down to right now running 13% lower than it was a year ago. That's an incredible amount of volatility. And that's not saying anything. That's the base rate. That's not saying anything about the fuel surcharge, which had a similar oscillation from being down 20% to up 85% to down 15%, just in a matter of 3 years. You layer those on top of each other, that's an enormous amount of volatility. I mean, you know, Max, I don't know how you make a decision on how to buy a truck that you're going to use for 3 to 5 years. How do you make that capital decision when you have this much volatility? One of the most commonly referred, what's this? What'd you say? You gamble. Like this. That's how you make the decision. Well, yeah, but if you bet right, fine, you win. You win, and you win big. But if you bet wrong, you're in a heap of trouble. You're one of the thousands and thousands and thousands of transportation companies that have gone bankrupt. It's just the way the reality of it is. So I'm excited. I'm inspired because it finally gives a way for shippers, truckers, freight brokers, everybody in the industry to hedge their risk. And I'm looking forward to what's going to happen tomorrow morning. I'm looking forward to what the future holds. We'll find out if you're the next Fred Smith. But the bottom line is the potential, because you've recognized an idea, and I know we're all proud to be a part of it.